We're here again. Welcome back.
Yes.
To all of our previous listeners.
And then some extras.
Yes, I'm sure because we've gotten more followers. This is the Which Way Is Up show. I'm Michi.
And I'm Scott.
And yeah, this is what? Episode number 2?
Episode number 2, but officially our 3rd recording.
Right. And so we've grown so much in less than a month. We've got social media pages.
Yes, and followers.
Yes, and it's growing every day. Thank you, everyone, for the love and the feedback. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
At WWIU Show. That's for the same one for both Instagram and Facebook. And then our YouTube is Which Way Is Up Show. We are also on SoundCloud.
Yes.
Which Way Is Up Show. And we are officially on all major podcast platforms.
What?
We are on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Google Podcasts. We are on Stitcher.
Out of control.
I don't know much about Stitcher, but I like saying Stitcher.
So
with
you
my
all need
podcast
to
voice.
follow, share, like,
Yes.
subscribe, but most of all,
Listen.
we want you to listen.
Yes.
Yes.
We appreciate the following, but
Yes.
we would like it for you to click on at least one of the snippets and kind of get a feel of what we're doing here, because that's the whole thing. We weren't really looking to just gain a social media following. We want some people to participate at least by listening, and then hopefully down the line we can see how we can incorporate the listener participation into the show somehow.
Absolutely, yeah. And we are getting a lot of feedback. People are commenting, or we'll get an inbox message, or people will call us, and so definitely the reception.
It's good. It's
good.
Good at
Yeah.
getting. I definitely got some inboxes. Like I was telling you earlier, somebody definitely gets the name and said something to the effect that if everybody was looking up, we would all be in different directions. And I was like, yes, that's it. That's exactly what we're talking about. Family member of mine, my aunt, she loved it. She wants to have a conversation about one of the shows or maybe both of the shows.
You better make time.
I'm going to make time because I do respect her input and her judgment. And I would like to know, but she's been definitely supportive. And we're getting a lot of followers from your end. I guess being filtered through the Facebook. Oh, and I almost forgot that Facebook now has a podcast feature. They literally, they're not the host exactly, but they're acting as a major platform, just as, Spotify or Apple or Google or something like that. So we can also be found through our Facebook page, which is actually a podcast page. So all new episodes, once they are uploaded, will be also coming out through our Facebook page. And so the Facebook page is definitely getting a lot of likes. So I personally hate Facebook. I call it fake book. But the business page or the podcast page is working great because I'm not there to look at people's timelines necessarily or anything. I'm pretty much looking for the engagement as far as our brand.
Yeah.
There's a show. It's Colin in Black and White, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's only been on there for like 2 weeks now, I believe, or this was you have to. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and it just like to get into that, how this misinformation, not only like are we putting it out there, and that's why we're responsible, but like we have to look to see how it's impacting other people. So you see how, he identifies with Iverson as a child. He identifies with him. He's into sports. He's a young black man. He sees himself in Iverson, but then he's also hearing how even at home, it's like, no, because you're going to look like a thug, or, and he,
spoiler alert.
yeah. Sorry for those of you that haven't watched, but
yeah,
it has far-reaching implications. The whole, what the media puts out there, how they portray people, places, experiences, even, so it's just, I found it extremely interesting to see how, because I didn't know a lot about Kaepernick. I'm not, a sports fan. I heard more about him when he started kneeling.
Yeah, I didn't know he was adopted. I just thought he was, which he is, like,
he is mixed race.
He's mixed race, a biracial, he's a biracial child, but
right.
I didn't know he was actually adopted and had 2 white parents.
Right.
And now look, like, with all the, when it was at the heat of the moment with the controversy with him kneeling, I do remember some of his, some of the opposing forces kind of like commenting, like, he grew up privileged with white parents or whatever, but I just thought they were just talking shit,
Right. Yeah. And then you do see how, in the movie, he refers to his experiences growing up, and it just really opened up my eyes that this wasn't a man that from one day to the next was jumping on a bandwagon, or was trying to get publicity. Or, he did come from privilege, but even in that privileged lifestyle, it was
a struggle for him.
It was a struggle for him because he looked different. Yeah. And everywhere he went, they reminded him that he was different. So it just made me appreciate him that much more. And it made me appreciate him taking the stance that he took and giving up what he gave up, because he had been dealing with this basically all his life. Yeah. And so you guys have to watch it. I've been watching a lot of stuff lately that touches on racism, especially. Yeah.
But with the show with Colin, though, because there's going to be some people, the respect the flag for folks and the back the blue folks. Like, this is not about his kneeling. This is not even about his NFL career or anything like that. This is more about his childhood. And his upbringing.
So you can understand. It puts in perspective.
That's exactly what it does.
Everything that he did. It makes sense.
Right.
And it is the experience of every Black man, woman, and child in this country. And we need to recognize it. And,
it made me think, right? Cause I'm mixed race. I shared this with you guys. Well, you knew, but
in the pilot, right?
Yeah. In the pilot. But the difference with me was that I had 2 families, from very different worlds, right? That were often, although the families weren't beefing with each other, there was a culture clash that I was in the middle of, right? But I had the opportunity to experience either side or both sides or just one side or whatever it was, where he didn't, because although he was mixed race, like all he had was the white privilege side, where, where his parents, they weren't rich, because people hear privilege and they think rich, but they were pretty good.
In that scene when they're driving to the, I don't know if you saw,
to the football camp,
where every week,
or the baseball camp,
every week they were driving, and it wasn't until he was behind the wheel that they got pulled over. So, you're right. People think, they hear the word privilege and they think rich, and that's not it. In the article that you had me read about unpacking the invisible knapsack, she talks about it.
Peggy McIntyre.
Right. Yes. She talks about how her privilege is just based on the color of her skin. Mm-hmm. And she goes on to list at least 25 things that she doesn't have to worry about every day simply because she's white. Right. So and we see that also. We see how his parents do step outside of their comfort zone to try to, help and be a guide to their son. But we also see where they just are also trying to do what everybody else is doing, and just this is society and everybody.
There was the part with his mom where, as far as when she agreed to, that he was gonna get the braids, and she takes him, to not necessarily the hood, but to be around his people. That was my take from it, where she understood that in order for him to have that experience, she needs to take him to people that understand, and she did that because she did. Yeah. I mean, physically stepped outside by taking him there, and it was funny in a way because when he gets there. And, he's surrounded by Black folks. He's like at home, and he's like,
he was alone.
He didn't realize like this, just something simple with the food, where he was always drowning the food his mom's cooking with the salt because of the lack of seasoning, and he's, and then he goes to the woman's house that braids his hair, and they're serving food, and she's like, oh, you're going to need some salt, whatever. And he's like, no, this is good just the way it is. That was funny, but Mom, she really, really seemed sincere. Like she wanted him to have that experience, and she wanted him to be comfortable, in his skin, and it wasn't until they started getting the pushback from the coaches in the school about his braids that they kind of just stepped back and doubled down and just went back into an ignorant mode.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, you guys have to watch it. To everyone who's listening, take the time out to watch it, because again, coming from someone who didn't know anything about Kaepernick, never followed him, but got really interested in him once he started, to kneel, during the anthem, I just stood behind him immediately because I knew exactly where he was coming from. Or so I thought. And then I watched this and I'm like, no, this guy did not just discover oppression. You know what I mean?
Right.
He has been dealing with it all of his life. And if he wants to kneel during the anthem, God damn it, he has the right to do it without anybody's judgment or having to hear their mouth.
What I was saying is all the comments and the hate that he was getting, and this constantly, saying, kind of like trying to shoot down his character and his cause because of where he came from, and referring to, him being, part in this privilege bubble, which on the surface, sure, it appeared like that. But, this series really goes into, although he was physically in this space, he was really in a bad space, because of what he had to do. Because like the difference between him and I is we probably are closer to the same complexion, but he has more of the African American features with the hair, which that you just can't hide that, And when his hair wasn't braided, it was just like blowout mode. Like he, now it's really blown out, and he really does. And it was funny because when the whole thing started, when he started kneeling, he was wearing braids. He had his hair braided. It was tight, and it just seemed to me that once the controversy really started kicking off, he was like, you know what? I'm going to take out these braids. And I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get this blowout thing going, and I'm really gonna show you my blackness.
I love it.
I was like, and then the images started just, and I was like, I love that, And then that's just his look now. He doesn't really wear braids as much anymore. He just got the blowout now, and I love it.
It's very militant. I love it.
Yeah, and I mean. Because, I don't want to go too much into him and the situation, because like we said, the show doesn't really go into all that. And it's just a snapshot of, his adolescence and his grade school and high school experience up until he's getting ready to go to college. And that's kind of where the series ends as far as that part of his life. I don't know if they'll, it'd be great to see, what his college experience was like, or whatever. I don't even know if he went to college. Did he go straight to the pros?
I don't know
because I don't watch. I don't watch football
anything
anymore.
about him except what I just watched. Something else that, like, we talked about his mom and his parents, his adopted parents, and the whole privilege thing. I was watching another show, Explained, about the monarchy. So the show Explained is like 30-minute segments. They've got like 4 or 5 seasons, but literally there's like all these different topics, no more than 30 minutes. They explain it. And I'm digging the show because when they pick a topic, they come at it from all different angles. It's not really a biased,
right.
View on whatever topic. And the topics are all over the place. So there was one about the monarchy. And they were talking about how basically the monarchy means nothing. All these royal families around the world mean absolutely nothing. It's all for show. And, whereas back 1500s, the belief was that the monarchy was bestowed upon them by God. Now the monarchy is just the monarchy because of the media.
Yeah.
Basically. So, but what one of the things that they go into is, well, then how do these people, like, how do they make all this money? How do they, have all this? And naturally it's over time, but specifically Great Britain, the majority of their riches, when you follow, the financials or whatever, was made off the slave trade.
Yeah.
Like they were responsible for like almost 70% of the slave trade that was happening all around the globe. And like when you watch the show, they break it down, like, what percentage they basically disseminated all over North, Central, South America. But something else that I saw was it was a post on one of the social media pages that we follow, talking about decolonization, etc., about the role that women played in colonizing.
Yes.
And so, again, the same week I'm watching the show, Colin, his mom, how she stepped outside of herself, right? Like to do the right thing for her son. But historically, that is not the role that white women have played. They have been,
they play their position.
Absolutely. Right. And they played it very well. In terms of domesticating, to use their words, teaching like, skills to women, to indigenous women on housekeeping and tending to the family, etc., which comes away from the tribe mentality where it was more about what are you good at, not every woman was good at cooking. Some of the women were good at hunting. So guess where they were, so, and then in indoctrinating children, really planting that colonization seed and bringing them away from their natural state. So I just found it interesting because I'm like, the monarchy has had their hand in, colonization practices, starting with, slave trade, and then here you have white women who, up until, the other day, they're on the front lawn waiting for Trump and JFK Jr.
Right.
So
and playing their position on election day, which was just past Tuesday.
Virginia happened because of white women.
Right.
So yeah, elections in Jersey City.
Well, all over, but we're in Jersey City, so.
So Philip got in again, and his machine.
And you're talking about Mayor Steve Phillip of Jersey City.
And the majority of his machine, his rubber stamps, his puppets.
The establishment machine.
Exactly. Except for my home ward. I don't live there anymore, but I grew up there. Ward F. Got themselves a real stand-up man of the community as their council person. And I'm really proud of that.
And you're talking about Frank
Frank Gilmore.
Frank Gilmore.
Yes, Education Gilmore, as he's known. And there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to do a lot. He already does so much for the area, which is why he got in. People know him. He's not just holed up in his business or just holed up in City Hall. He's out and about and, talking to the people and addressing the issues. And the fact that Fulop didn't even show up for the very last debate that was hosted in Ward F with the incumbent. This was before the election.
Right.
A lot of people were highly insulted. The one who was running against him, Louis Spears. They were supposed to have a debate. He didn't even show up. Fulop didn't show up. But what I was excited about when it came to Louis Spears is that he had less than 1% of Fulop's campaign budget, and he got 30% of the vote in the city, which says a lot about the direction that the city's moving in. And I know 30% is not a lot in terms of election numbers, but it says it's a needle where, we're able to see where we're at in terms of, people just thinking more progressively.
And just tired of corporations, putting their candidates in place in order to do their bidding, and I think people look at this, as a loss or whatever, but they don't realize that, there's strategists in place that are really looking at that 30% and they're comparing it to 25, 30 years ago, where it's probably like way less, probably not even half of that, where people were just going along with, the same old status quo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more to do. And then in New Jersey, we had a little
nail biter.
Yeah, definitely. I was concerned that, we were going to go in the direction of Virginia, but thank God that didn't happen.
We spoke right after election day, the following day, where the Virginia decision had already came in, but Jersey was still out. And my attitude at the time, I was telling you earlier, like I was extra pessimistic. Like anybody that doesn't know, like my current social media handle on my personal pages on Instagram and on Twitter is pessimistic optimist, right? Because and you pointed out that, that pretty much translate into being a realist, right? Because of the world we live in and the society we live in. So I was a little extra going hard on the Democratic Party and the way I was seeing these races between the governor's race between New Jersey and Virginia in a way where I was thinking that, Democrats shouldn't have really struggled with these areas, forgetting New Jersey, definitely not Virginia, but New Jersey's not really a blue state.
Exactly.
Especially when it starts getting down to more like the state and local levels.
Yeah.
It's not,
I actually checked since 1974 when we were born. We've had 5 Republican governors and 5 Democratic governors.
Right.
It's like even.
Yeah. And Democratic governor hadn't won a second term for decades.
Yeah, because Corzine was only in there once.
Right. So they weren't getting reasected for some reason.
Right.
So actually Murphy exceeded expectation.
Yeah.
He broke a cycle. So good for him, and pretty much it was typical for Virginia, and we could get caught up sometimes with thinking, because my personal belief is, although I'll talk about my feeling about the Democrats in a minute, but the Republican Party, the party of Trump, the party of the Quniverse, the heartbeat of Trumpism, it's like, why are they still here? And not only that they're still here, they're winning elections, right? Because everybody's focusing on 2024 and whether Trump's going to win or not. And there's a whole lot of shit going on right now. Not to mention we got 2022 coming up, which personally I believe Democrats are finished. And it's so hard to imagine that happening after this whole Trump administration experience and the terrorist acts and all these investigations.
But it's because the Democrats right now are so spineless.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to kind of talk about, because what I've learned is, and I've come to accept that I'm a registered Democrat, and that's just because of the way I vote, right? If I want to vote in primaries where there's someone that's further left than the establishment candidate, I want to be able to vote for that instead of being an independent or some part of a third party, and I can't really be involved in that. And then most likely, with this whole lesser of two evil strategy that we're stuck with, But my thing is, and it's not just my thing, this is the reality that there's really not two political parties. We have just like one party with two different factions, and they're both on to the right of the political spectrum. And we got Republicans who are off the fucking deep end as far as where they're going, where they've gone, and where they're going to continue to go. And then we have the Democrats who are Republican lights, that are, and it's been like that because now because I wasn't into politics or anything that deep back in the 90s, but looking back at Clinton, right? Clinton, as much as the Republicans and conservatives hated him and started their misinformation campaigns and they impeached him and all this hatred for Hillary, Clinton passed Republican, right-wing, conservative policies, major pieces of legislation. The crime bill, right? The crime bill, which actually had bipartisan support back then. And members of the Congressional Black Caucus were on board of it because we were living in the crack era, right? And people, especially in Black communities and other non-white communities, were experiencing hell from that era, and people didn't really know what else to do. So they were supporting their politicians to just lock up and arrest this problem and make the streets safer. And they fell into that. While there were more progressive voices that were, but they were such a small amount that they just got drowned out where they were speaking up, and they did foresee the crime bill to do the damage that it ultimately turned out to do. Right. But back then, we can't look at it in a 2021 lens, what was going on in 1992.
Yeah. Even back then, those of us that were, we were just becoming adults, right? We were 17, 18, 19 years old. Like, we knew something ain't right here. You know what I'm saying? Like
when we started hearing that whole 3 strikes thing, it was like, that's a problem.
We were definitely, and I feel like we were also, I don't know, maybe it was just because of the circle I ran with, but we were rebellious. We were like, nah, you're not gonna, I don't know. Again, maybe that was just me, but like I was burning bras.
See, you and I was in the streets doing all other type of shit, and I was trying not to pay attention. But looking back now, and back on Clinton, another major piece of legislation was welfare reform, which, and that was the big thing back then. The crime bill, wasn't really that big. They made it a big thing when it was time for Hillary to shine, and they shut her down with it. But the welfare reform was detrimental to, people of color and children, as far as the type of cuts and restrictions they put on, just social welfare programs that people would use. And it's never been the same since. And they're still cutting and chipping away at whatever they can, So what I'm saying is to say is that even as Democrats, they push conservative policy. They push law and order policies. They push social welfare programs.
They're two wings on the same bird.
Right. So then the same thing with Obama, where he, I fell for that hope and change shit too, because he's an excellent speaker.
Yes.
Right? Excellent speaker, and definitely makes people that, have that type of vision feel good and make you want to go out there and get involved, do all type of shit. But then he just turned out to be the typical imperialist president doing what presidents do in this country.
And I think that it also made me realize, seeing all that, it just really helped me realize. And I mean, we knew this, right? Because we learned it in school, but it's really not put that way. Like, the president is not the final, say all, be all,
Right.
end all. Like, your representatives, your senators, your governors, all those people matter. And those are the people that we really have to, because at the end of the day, those are the ones that are voting, and then whatever it is that the majority vote, but I think that in this country, they definitely push it that way as a way to just make sure that they can control through this one person where the votes go. But this person really has a very limited amount of power.
Right. Except when we're talking about the imperialist imperialism part, because
you're right.
Because after 9/11 and they passed the Patriot Act, where and that just gave the president a lot of powers when it came to war and terrorism, or what they would decided they were going to label as terrorism and terrorists. And so normally things that would have to go through Congress, for approval or whatever, the Bush administration just found a way around that. And everybody, the Democrats and Republicans, they were all, because everybody was hyped up after 9/11, except I think there was one woman in Congress, and they just recently, because of the 20th anniversary of 9/11, they showed her on the floor. She was the only one that opposed the type of legislation that they were trying to pass, because everybody was bloodthirsty at the time. And she was able to step back and say, this is a problem, and this is going to take our country into a dark place. And she was so fucking on point with it. And it just showed and as much as conservatives and right wingers, they just wanted to make Obama a socialist or a communist or whatever. Like, he was dropping bombs, and he was deporting at a mass scale. And so as much as they try to complain about him or whatever, and even with Hillary, like the thought of Hillary being a president, she was going to do the same shit. Yeah. Right. Which is, the whole, if you were judging her according to that super predator comment she made back then, and to policies passed by Bill Clinton, she was going to do the same shit, which is right wing type
part
shit.
Of the machine.
Right. Part of the machine, part of the establishment. Yeah. But they have a way of messaging, excellent way of messaging, where you can't tell what's up is down, down is up. This is where we kind of came up with our name, which way is up. Misinformation basically means, things that are not true, or they may appear to be true or not completely true.
Right. And
disinformation is the deliberate use and spread of misinformation in order to cause confusion and deceive people. Right. So the what we're really latching on to is the disinformation.
Yes.
Because misinformation is pretty much a common part of life.
Happens. We're
it
human.
Happens. We're not. Right. It's always happened. There's always been propaganda and some greater forces that benefit from twisting up the facts or, denying the facts.
And we've seen media be responsible in those instances. I'm sure we've all read an article that had, some kind of correction on the bottom.
Right.
Like, we've seen media fix misinformation. What we're really talking about is disinformation, is when information gets twisted to appear to be one thing when it's not.
Right.
Right.
And like I keep saying, this is something, even though I didn't understand it, I didn't know that there was a term disinformation, and I didn't understand, what was behind it. And I also didn't understand that this history that we have with the propaganda and the misinformation, disinformation, has occurred in a great length during times of social movements, right? Whether it be the early days of the workers' movements, the Great Depression era, and it's always been about battling capitalism. But back then, you know, this country had like a socialist party. They had a communist party. You know, the reason why those things don't exist or not at the extent that they did back in those days is because they were crushed, and they were crushed primarily by misinformation and disinformation, which causes the public to think a certain way, or even to start to dehumanize people that are part of these movements, where when it comes time for them to be physically crushed, the public's going to be okay with it because you've already conditioned them to thinking that they are the evil of our society. Right. The civil rights era, the Black Power movement, where there is actually people that have studied this and they realize the significance of how misinformation and disinformation is important to upholding the white power structure in this country. So that the article shared earlier, it was an essay, and it was published by the Harvard Kennedy School, titled "Critical Disinformation Studies: History, Power, and Politics" by Rachel Kuo, I believe it is, and Alice Maverick. And they write, and I just took one of these quotes out: "In the United States, identity, particularly race, plays a role in the messages and strategy of disinformation producers and who disinformation and misinformation resonate with. Expanding what counts as disinformation demonstrates that disinformation is primary media strategy that has been used in the U.S. to reproduce and reinforce white supremacy and hierarchies of power at the expense of populations that lack social, cultural, political, and economic power." They go on to say that these disinformation narratives have amplified racist, homophobic, and xenophobic tropes throughout history. Just bring it to the anti-vaxxers right now. The people that have never really been about anything as far as social movements and social issues, and they find themselves a part of their own movement, they were prey to these type of people, because at the same time when you're arguing about your freedoms, your medical freedoms, and your as far as not having to take the vaccine or whatever, they're grooming you to, because, and we're going to see it when the major elections come up, 22 and 24, where the Democrats or anybody on the left are going to be known as the ones that were pushing the mandates and the vaccine on people and making people do what they don't want to do.
Not the warp speed crew.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
No.
So, and just to wrap up this part, media literacy, which it's always been a part of journalism studies, academia, which they've already have a problem with, have really had this under a lens for some time. And it's gotten more specific, where it's critical digital literacy, which is really taking a look at, social media, because, media literacy doesn't only pertain to, digital, it could, be newspapers and the news, or, and journalism as a whole. But critical digital literacy focuses on, of course, the digital, the social media aspect, and it starts to touch on how it's attacking people in certain groups, in marginalized groups, and people that lack political power and social power and things like that. And then, and I just learned the term this week, disinformation studies. There are groups of people and organizations that are coming together involving social scientists and social workers and anybody that wants to be interested in learning about it, to not only have basic media literacy taught in like K through 12, because most people think that they have common sense, but this is not a common sense thing. This is something.
This is about understanding how search engines work.
Yes.
And keywords.
And algorithms.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And recognizing that the people that are telling you to do your research have an agenda. Right? Because anybody that's come across some information according to their research, they love to share their sources with people. You know, like I just did. I just told you what I just read from, because I would encourage you to go look at that article and then go look at who read it and go look at their work. And that's how the whole information flow and the research goes. And you can go into dark holes, you know, by according to what you follow. But the whole media literacy thing goes really deep. And I'm gonna, you know, in future shows, I'm going into talk, you know, about ways that we engage online that we can help reduce our personal intake of misinformation and engaging with people that are involved with disinformation and getting us to believe that we're part of some grassroots movement when it's already been pre-planned. Like it's, you know, these people have been doing this for decades, you know, so and it's a personal passion of mine because I'm seeing in my own profession how misinformation can be spread with people with credentials, people with master's degrees and doctorates, you know, that legitimize, you know, once they share it and it's attached to their credentials, they're legitimizing it in a way where the average person that hasn't gotten all that education and doesn't have the necessary skills to do this advanced level of research, they're going to say, well, if such and such said it, exactly, you know, it's got to be true. Because that's something that I experienced recently within my profession. And I'm going to talk about that going forward. So, and it's become a passion of mine because, you know, it's, you know, we have a lot of different issues and a lot of different social issues in our society. And this is something that people are not really catching on to, because the reality is, most people think they have common sense and they think that just being able to read articles, it's easy to tell what's real, what's true, what's false. And it's not, because we all fall prey to it, you know, especially us in our age group and a little bit older that are not particularly tech savvy, and our elders, they're the ones that are being, they're falling prey to it in large scale. So it's become a passion of mine, and there's tons of information and lessons on it. And so I've been doing this because this is something that I want to, you know, become, you know, for my personal sake, you know, to have more knowledge and awareness, but I also want to help spread it.
No doubt. I mean, this is what we're doing here, right? We're not trying to stay ignorant. We're trying to like really look at what it is look at and talk about the things that other people are not going to talk about, because that's what they want. They want to keep us asleep, and we don't do asleep around here. We do woke.
Right. Like wide awake type thing. Because the fact is, we got like 24 followers, 32 followers, something like that. We've definitely...
Excuse you.
Uh-oh.
Excuse you.
I'm about to get corrected.
We have over 120 followers on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, we got...
And over 50 on Instagram.
All right. So we've definitely raised the bar in the last couple of weeks. But the reality is, now to the average quote unquote influencer, that's nothing. But if we look at, let's say we'll take the 50 that's following on Instagram, every one of those 50 people knows at least one anti-vaxxer. Mm-hmm. They know at least one Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. You know, one person that doesn't want to wear a mask. So they all, if they're not fall into one of those categories themselves, right? So that just shows that this is important as far as this is not just us coming up on here to talk shit because we're trying to build a following or whatever. It's like these are things that we said that from the beginning. Yeah, we're not trying to be famous here. We're just because we could just
walk one red carpet or two.
Yeah. Well, you said if you go back to our pilot episode, you said you still want to be able to walk down the street. So be careful, because you know the red carpet, then all that goes out the window, and they're gonna be like, yeah, there she is, the woke queen of the Which Way Is Up show.
I think this is 2 episodes.
This is probably 2 episodes. We're going to see where my editing skills go with this. Yeah. We're definitely going to have a lot of clips.
So, did you want to end with on a positive note?
Yes, because we realized that the majority of the content that we touch on and that we're going to be discussing is pretty heavy. And it would be completely irresponsible to just drop all this heavy stuff on you and then say,
but I
have a good night.
Yeah, I know. I do have to say, though, again, if you guys get a chance, you got to watch Colin in Black and White on Netflix. It's on now. Excellent. Especially if you're someone like me who didn't really know anything about Colin Kaepernick, except for when he was getting criticized, for not standing for the national anthem. To hear his story, is really amazing. And then while that show explained on Netflix, they cover all kinds of topics. There's a topic about hurricanes, and of course they focus on Puerto Rico. There's a topic about water, where they talk about the impact of, what's happening in the environment and how that's impacting our water supply, which, as human beings, we need water to survive. So this show literally will cover just about every topic. And I also like it because it's not like, like literally you could just go on Netflix, look it up, and then watch whichever, episode you want to watch. So just some fun tips.
Right. So we decided that
to end on a positive note.
So which would also be something that we would be ripping from social media or, any of headlines, which is not too many. We have to dig for positive headlines or whatever. Yeah. So we decided that we're just going to take one thing towards the end of the show and just kind of share it, and not necessarily for a discussion, but just something to drop on our listeners. And hopefully it'll, help balance out all that heavy, not so optimistic content that we dropped on it. So what we're going to start with, actually, this is a post today by the People's Forum in New York City. It involves movement of solidarity with Cuba. And I'll just read off what the statement says from the People's Forum. This morning, we delivered a solidarity shipment of 18,000 pounds of canned tuna and pasta to Cuba. And the donation will be received by the Martin Luther King Memorial Center in Havana. This Food for Cuba campaign builds on the tremendous success of the Syringes for Cuba campaign, through which a coalition of U.S. groups raised over $500,000 to purchase 6 million syringes for Cuba's COVID-19 vaccine drive. It is an expression of the growing rejection among the U.S. public of the economic blockade and policies aimed to economically punish the Cuban people. Definitely, if you want to look more into it, you can go find them on Instagram. It's People's Forum NYC. And then you can also definitely Google them. And they also have a YouTube page where they do a lot of great work. And this was great because if people may not realize this, but Cuba developed their own vaccination. The issue with having their vaccination is that the blockade is not letting the necessary medical supplies get into the country in order to administer the vaccination at a large scale. And that's not something that we're going to get into because that would totally be counterproductive to ending this on a positive note. Yeah. So shout out to the People's Forum and the great work they did for the people of Cuba.
Yes. And shout out to Frank Gilmore in Jersey City for really going up against the establishment and being, for the people and getting that position.
Hopefully getting a little progressive movement started in Jersey City, because from what I'm seeing, they're there. They just they're not at this moment right now. They're no match for the establishment. Yeah. But you wait. You just wait. You just wait.
You have to hit them up and.
All right. So don't forget, check us out on our socials. Facebook and Instagram is WWIU Show. You can also find us on YouTube, and what else do we have?
SoundCloud, Apple, Stitcher.
I love saying Stitcher.
Spotify.
And Stitcher.
Or just go on our Facebook page because they have the podcast feature.
The podcast there.
And follow,
and
like,
listen,
share, subscribe.
Drop us a comment and let us know that you at least listen to one of our clips. We just want to try to get a feel if everyone that's following are just doing as much listening, or they're just following, just thinking that we're just doing this whole social media thing, which is not the primary purpose here. So definitely thanks again. I think we raised the bar again this time.
Yes, we did.
And till next time.
This is Michi.
And this is Scott.
Have a good night.